And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Still Curtain podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Jaggi, editor of Still Curtain. Joining me, as always, is co-host Shayne Kubas, contributor for Still Curtain. We're going to talk about Markus Golden's role on the Steelers, what that's going to look like in 2023, or at least what we think it'll look like. We're going to name some breakout players and potentially what their seasons could look like coming up here. Before we do that, let's just touch on some trending topics first. And we'll kick things off, Shayne, with Le'Veon Bell's comments. So, I mean, it's funny that we're talking about Bell in the way that we are still at this long after the fact, but obviously Bell goes on the Still Here podcast. He shares a lot of information, including some of his past regrets. He also shared that he would smoke marijuana before football games. So what do you make, Shayne, of everything that Le'Veon Bell just said on the podcast here?
So there's definitely a lot to break down with it. I think that let's start with the obvious one that people are talking a lot about, the marijuana situation. I'm not that surprised. I wouldn't be surprised that if
Yeah.
there was dozens of other players who also probably do that. So that isn't a huge shock to me. Him saying it is a little bit surprising, although like at this point, I guess it doesn't matter too much because even though he did mention he'd like a chance in the preseason with the team, I don't know if that's going to happen. So, he's probably not really worried about that at this point.
Yeah.
But I think it is interesting, and like I will say, like the way his play style was, he was very methodical. We always say he was kind of in slow motion. Maybe he actually was a little bit in slow motion, depending on how you look at it. But no, I mean, if that is the case, then one, pretty impressive to be able to be as good as he was while dealing with that, depending on how much it really hurt or helped him. But I think the most interesting part of it, though, is the fact that when he looked back at things, he did regret the whole situation. And I think in hindsight, like part of the problem with this, and this is the case with running backs now and with the Steelers in general, is most teams aren't going to give you guaranteed money past that like first year of the deal, right? So that was the big hang up at the time, was really not so much the amount of money, it was how the money and how the structure was paid out and how everything like that worked with the contract. So it's obviously in hindsight, if he would have stayed with the Steelers, he would have been a better player down the stretch of his career. Most likely, would have been on better teams. So I'm sure he does feel a little bit of regret because, looking at how that New York team did and Adam Gase, and he talked about the difference between head coaches and stuff like that. He didn't realize how much of a difference it really was. All of it makes a lot of sense. It really does.
Yeah. I mean, me personally, Shayne, I don't have regrets about the way that turned out because I was saying at the like, so Le'Veon Bell was coming off a season in which he had 321 carries. This was before he decided to hold out and not tell his teammates about it.
Yes. Yeah.
Over 400 touches. When you give somebody as much usage as you did, I was very concerned that the Steelers even offered him the deal that they offered. And so I'm actually still to this day, I'm pleased that he decided to go with the Jets. And I know that goes against what a lot of fans would say. And you get an all-pro player, you want to keep them around. There's just so much evidence of running back shelf life. There's so much evidence of running back over usage. And when that tread is off the tires, there's just nothing left. And we're talking about Le'Veon Bell, who came into the league running a 4.6. And so the guy did not hit explosive plays at a high rate at all. He was good, but he didn't hit explosive plays at a high rate. We could see the downward trend, I think, already, Shayne, in that final season with the Steelers. He took a drastic dip in efficiency from 4.9 yards a carry down to 4.0, and it only got worse from there. He was horrendous on the Jets. I mean, the guy averaged 3.2 yards a carry, even though they tried to force feed him the ball in the running game and the passing game, just was not an efficient player at all. And I do think that his career would have lasted longer in Pittsburgh. It's just like, how much longer when you're getting the usage that you did? He had the ACL tear in the past. And so it's just interesting. And the fact that there are people out there saying, like, let's make it happen. Let's have this comeback story. But Bell's a 31-year-old player who's been removed from football, who lost everything. I mean, we watched him in his final years of his career. There was nothing left. And so I just don't see the appeal of saying, yeah, let's take Jaylen Warren off the field and put Le'Veon Bell on there. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me at all. So I didn't understand that point of it. He was very, very bold, very honest about what he had to say. And maybe it's some things that the NFL needs to kind of fix on their end. If they're able to, these players are getting away with what they're getting away with, and these things are happening. I don't know. So it just very interesting. I found the whole situation very interesting there.
Yeah, the way his career ended, it does seem like even if he had signed the deal that we wanted to give him, we probably would have gotten maybe 2 more starting caliber seasons from him.
Yeah.
And then we would have had to move on, which granted, with the way the contract was structured, there's a reason why it was structured where it was pretty much just guaranteed for that first year because they could get out of it then if they needed to. So maybe he would have been looked on more favorably at the end of his career, but bounced around a little bit at the end there. And I do think, like you said, there's no real reason for any team to bring him in at this point. It doesn't bring special teams value. He's not going to be able to play that for you. He has to be valuable on offense, and I just don't think he is at this point.
Yeah, and I do applaud Kevin Colbert for structuring that contract extension, what it would have looked like the way that he did, because you don't want to lock yourself in long term with somebody who's already had a ton of wear and tear on the rookie deal. So it all works out. I mean, the Steelers, again, because they lost Le'Veon Bell, they turned the compensatory pick into James Conner, who had a great career in Pittsburgh when he was healthy. And then they moved from there to the duo that they have now. And it all works out. But I mean, not disappointed that Bell left, but obviously you wish that he could have left on better terms. A guy, former All-Pro, one of the best to play for the Steelers, at least during that stretch. And so wish we could have been on better terms. All right, Shayne, notes from Steelers OTAs. A lot of stuff floating out there. Again, this is practice in shorts.
Right. It's not.
We don't want to. Yeah, we don't want to make it more than what it is, but it is football. It's out there, and so we're seeing these videos floating around Twitter. Obviously, you and I aren't there, but Steelers media has taken some vids and they've posted them to Twitter. Anything that you've noticed so far? Anything that you wanted to point out from OTAs?
Yeah, and for me, like with OTAs, what I'm looking for is I want to see, do guys look different? Have they changed something about the way that they play, the way they're trying to build themselves as far as their body, their mindset? That's really what you're looking for, because you can get some early returns on like what kind of work guys have been doing in the off season. If a guy's slimming down, obviously that means that he thinks he needs to add some explosiveness. If he's bulking up, maybe that means you're going to get some more power from this game, whether that's as a interior player or whatever position it is. You're looking for more power, or just more durability. So, for example, like a guy like Mark Robinson, apparently he has looked fantastic just in shorts, obviously, and he is a kind of that bundle of energy type of player. But he seems, and the big thing is, it seems like he's slowed down a little bit as far as his ability to process. Like he's been able to feel a little bit more comfortable with everything, and that's really the part of his game that needs to get better, is making everything slow down a little bit, seeing what's in front of you and attacking it, and not having the missed tackles like he did at the end of last year or missed assignments. If he can play effectively and play in within himself, I think he can be a starting caliber linebacker for this team. Whether it happens right away or not, I'm not sure, just because we did bring in Holcomb obviously to be kind of the main linebacker, and then Roberts is experienced, all that, but he's going to have a shot to win that second linebacker job, and they probably play really well if he does win it.
Yeah, and Robinson's definitely doing himself some favors. I mean, he had the play of OTA so far with the pick six on Kenny Pickett. And again, it's practice in shorts, so we don't know how hard these guys are going, and if anybody could have tracked him down. Maybe it's not. Maybe he doesn't return for a touchdown, but it's a heads up play on his part. I kind of think when it comes to Robinson specifically, Shayne, I think that him and Landon Roberts are going to be kind of fighting for one role, if I had to guess. They both feel so similar in the way that they play, in their downhill mentality, the way that they win. I think that Holcomb's going to be that MAC linebacker, that guy they want out there in nickel and dime. And so I'm interested to see how that kind of rotation shakes out there, because we saw a pretty heavy rotation between the Steelers' 3 linebackers last year in Jack Bush and Spillane. Obviously, all 3 of them are gone now. So there's playing time open there. And that's if everybody's healthy even. And so somebody gets an injury. I mean, obviously Robinson's stepping up into a much bigger role. Other notes from OTA. Let's see here. Nothing really too much. Like Jaylen Warren looks like Quadzilla out there.
Yeah,
I mean, that guy put on some balls,
Najee got to be the most ripped running back duo maybe ever. Like those two just are gigantic people for their size. Like, granted, it's tough to say how much that is good or bad, but I think in Warren's case, he has looked a little bit more explosive. I've noticed in some of the videos I've seen, and he was explosive last year, honestly, more so than we thought he would be. So any added juice you can get out of him would be great. That's going to be really cool to see. I think the way he trained was interesting, because he, the hills, and he went out to Utah and was doing the hills. Like, all I think about with that is Jerry Rice videos back in the day when he would run the hills and stuff like that, and like working out more, but he wasn't trying to necessarily get shredded like he apparently has, but it worked out that way, and he looks, pretty good off for it. So.
Yeah, I mean, he looks quick and explosive, I feel
Yeah.
like, in these drills right now. And another guy that it does as well is Calvin Austin, who I
Yes.
mean, a lot of videos of Calvin Austin right now, and we knew that is the quick twitch guy. I mean, he's the speed guy on the Steelers, so you hope that he can stay healthy and carve out some sort of niche for them on offense. Other than that, I mean, I did see somebody was talking about DeMarvin Leal. It was Nick Farabah, I
Yeah.
think, that was talking
Yes.
about DeMarvin
Yeah.
Leal and his body type, and that he didn't really gain mass, and he might have actually gotten a little bit thinner, like lower body mass. So
Yeah.
that's a little bit concerning. If I need to look at that again and see. And obviously, we're just using the eye test at
Right.
this point. We don't really know, but this is a guy that I really was hoping like a year in the NFL weight room, bulk up, get up to around like the 300 mark, because
Yeah.
he came into the NFL at 283 as a full-time edge player at Texas A&M, and he's just not going to hold up there in the NFL because he's not fast enough or athletic enough to do that. So he's going to have to make his bread on the inside, and I would like to see him come in a little bit bigger than that, just from what I'm hearing right now.
Yeah, it does seem like his lower half, people are saying, is a little bit lighter, but his upper half is bigger. So I don't know if it's more of like a trade-off or if he did gain overall mass, just maybe lost some of it in his legs. It's really weird
Yeah.
because I feel like at the end of the day, at least for right now, it feels more like he is going to be a hybrid player where he is going to get some edge snaps, maybe as a
Mhm.
primary run defender on the edge, maybe as a guy that if you can put him up against a tackle that doesn't have, the athleticism to handle him, even though his athleticism is a little bit weak as far as straight line speed, but he does have the quickness and the bend. There's certain matchups I could see him being successful on the edge, even as a pass rusher, but he does have to be able to win inside, whether that's as a smaller player, if you can figure that out, or he will have to, like you said, add some muscle mass there too.
Yeah, and there were definitely flashes there as a rookie prior to the
Yeah.
injury where you can see like the pass rush potential, and just narrowly missed out on a couple sacks there.
Hmm.
But yeah, you're hoping obviously he takes that leap, and we'll see what happens with him. Let's talk about Kenny Pickett's stolen car here for a minute. I'm sure this is news that has made its way around
Yeah.
by this point, but stolen car, and the big news is his playbook was inside, Shane. So in
Yeah.
case you were wondering, his playbook was stolen as well.
Yeah, and weirdly enough, they checked it out and it just had a halfback dive in it. It was kind of weird that it was just like, so maybe they probably wouldn't learn
I love it.
anything. No, but anyway, no, I don't know if it would have mattered much, basically, the way we've been seeing the offense. But yeah, it's really
Yeah.
crazy that, like, obviously, it's not surprising he has the playbook. It's just that to get your car stolen while doing an interview and then the playbook, like, I'm sure he was stressing, like, just
Mhm.
feeling like, just so awful. And like, luckily, it seems like everything's fine. Like the guy apparently didn't even know it was in there. It seems like, so hopefully nothing happens with that again. Even if someone did steal the playbook, what are
Yeah,
they
yeah,
probably going to
we'd
learn?
hate for that
Yeah,
speed rollout on
right.
3rd and 4 to get out
Exactly. To
there
be,
to the opposing team. So
yes, like, I don't know what they're going to really learn. Honestly, maybe if that happened, they'd be forced to change up the offense so much that it'd be good. Maybe, I don't know. But honestly, I'm just glad that everything was fine with it. And I don't know that can't believe that. I'm sure that guy, when he found out it was Pickett's car, probably was like, "Oh no, I screwed up even more than I thought I screwed up." Like, so I don't know, but very interesting that
yeah,
that during a radio interview
yeah,
too.
just kind of a crazy situation. You don't see
Yeah,
that happen very often to NFL quarterbacks like
no,
that.
I'd
So
imagine not. Yeah,
uh,
so
we're gonna shift gears here. We're gonna talk about Markus Golden. If you guys have a question for us and you're
mhm.
live here with us, please drop it in the chat. Shane and I would love to get to your questions, anything you have. Let's see. Let's talk about his contract first of all. Shane, contract details for Markus Golden just came out, and I like what I'm seeing. I mean, this is about as good as it gets. I mean, you're talking like veteran minimum right
Mhm.
here for Golden, who turned 32 years old this offseason. This is what I wanted it to be. I just didn't know if they'd come in maybe a little bit higher than this figure just because
Yeah.
of his past success. I mean, he wasn't over the top productive last year, just 2.5 sacks, despite being essentially a full-time starter, started 14 of 17 games. Year prior to that, had a 10-sack season. And so we're looking at a guy who's just had a really productive career as a former second-round pick. And to get a guy with experience in kind of the insurance policy, if you will, for this cap number is excellent.
Yeah, I mean, I expected it to be closer to like the 3 million-ish range because that's about what he signed for last year. And although the
Mm,
production was down, like his overall like play level of play, I don't really think dipped that much. I just think the talent around him wasn't there as much. The Cardinals were already not very talented on the defensive front, even with him and Watt there. now, especially like if he was still there, that he'd have no shot of doing anything. I don't think like that front is about as bad as it gets. But that cap number is really good for the Steelers, obviously, because it basically makes him a free player in the end of the day. Like he's can be, especially if you can be that third edge for us this year. That this is nothing. Like this is a drop in the bucket for what they have to spend. So it is interesting. I did see that he did grow up as a fan of the Steelers, and maybe he just really wanted to play for us. And there probably was a team that was maybe willing to pay him a little bit more than this, but he didn't feel it was as good of an opportunity than coming to Pittsburgh. So, yeah, good on them for getting him this cheap.
Yeah, and so that number is 1.09 million. I don't know if I said that out loud. I put it up. Shayne put it up on the screen.
Yeah, I got
on
the
screen for us, but for our Spotify and Alexa listeners,
1.09 on the cap number. Yeah,
so that's not bad at all, considering the caliber of player you're getting. And I wasn't crazy about Markus Golden when they signed him. I mean, you got to temper expectations for the player that you're getting at this point in his career. But is he an upgrade over Malik Reed? Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any doubt about that. Last year, Shayne, Golden had 781 defensive snaps for the Arizona Cardinals. That's 70% of their total defensive snaps. That's not going to happen in Pittsburgh. And we know that. And we've seen kind of this situation play out. Just 2 years ago, the Steelers signed a similarly old Melvin Ingram, who was kind of, again, coming off of a very similar type season that what Golden is. And he was not happy with his role. And I think that part of it, though, is you can kind of tell the sense that you were getting from him in the first media session with the Steelers is like, as long as I'm out there, I'm going to be good. And Golden's response was obviously very different. Golden's like, I'm here to win. I'm here for the team. Whatever they ask me to do, that's going to be my job. And so I think him having that understanding coming in with that already, it's going to help the transition go much, much smoother than it did. They're not going to have to ship him away before the trade deadline or anything crazy like that. But we also know that he's not getting 70% of the defensive snaps. If that happens, it means, something really bad happened and TJ Watt is down again, or Highsmith this time. So we obviously hope for the best, hope that Watt can stay healthy, because the last time he was an MVP, even when he got injured and missed a couple games in the 2021 season. 2020, I thought he was fantastic. I still think 2020 is Watt's best overall season, regardless of
I would say
because he was just so physically dominant, and you can see the difference when he's healthy. So anyway, what is your projection here, Shayne? We're just let's put a percentage on it. Some fans might not have a great understanding of what a particular snap count means for defense players. So let's put it in terms of percentages here. He played 70% with the Cardinals last year. That's kind of like his MO throughout his career is in that range. But that's obviously going down now. What do you think that he's going to do in Pittsburgh, if you're just to put a percentage on his defensive snaps played?
So assuming that the starting edge rushers are relatively healthy, right? So, maybe miss a little bit of time here and there, but
assuming decent health,
but nothing too crazy. I would say about 30% of the snaps, because you get him in on some third down situations. You get him in to help just, again, give those guys a break occasionally on either side of the field. That sounds about right to me, about 30%. I hope it's around that amount if they're all healthy, just because that means he still gives them a break. Just give me a break every so often. So I will say, if there is an injury or if the guy misses a few games, you can start to see that creep up to closer to 50% of the snaps. And I think anything higher than that is definitely problematic. But if you can get him under that amount of snaps, he should be a very effective player whenever he does go out there.
Yeah, I agree with your figure there. 30 was the number I had in my head, and I think that can go like 30 to 38 range, even
somewhere
just depending on.
Yeah.
And Shayne, I'm perfectly fine if the Steelers want to say, I want to keep Watt as fresh as possible. If we make it to the postseason, want this guy fresh. I don't care if they limit his usage a little bit, assuming the Steelers are comfortable in the game and they're not in jeopardy of losing out because you're not playing Watt enough. But I mean, if try to reserve these guys as much as possible, because like we said, I think we even said on the last show, a lot of these good playoff caliber teams, they have at least 2 full rotation of edge players that they can deploy at any given time and say, go out there and get after the quarterback, and guys that they trust. The Steelers don't have the luxury of doing that. They never really have. They really haven't operated that way. They kind of have, you got your pair of full-time guys, and then you have the backup who occasionally comes in and spells them of snaps. I'm okay with limiting Watt's usage as much as possible, but I agree with you. If Watt and Highsmith are healthy, I still think that's going to be probably like the 30 to 38% a total defensive snap range, something like that. Now, what kind of impact do you think that Golden is going to have this year? Because obviously we looked at these past couple of years, it's been brutal in terms of edge depth for the Steelers. And neither you or I were a fan of Malik Reed last year. He just didn't offer anything. And when Watt was out for that stretch, I believe I looked this up on StatHead and I can't remember the exact figure, but I think the Steelers were on pace to be the fourth worst sack team in NFL history since it became a thing, when Malik Reed was in there and not TJ Watt. So that's the difference between the two.
Yeah, it was a stark difference. And I think the nice thing with Golden is I think ideally he's going to come in on mostly third downs, maybe some early rundowns occasionally, just because he is a bigger player overall. Like he can handle some of that snaps, maybe take some away from Highsmith occasionally. But the main thing with him is he's a technician, right? So he's not one of those guys who's just going to whip around the edge. He's not going to bend around the edge and just swipe the quarterback, do all that stuff. He's going to win because with his hand usage, with his leverage, all that stuff. And I think against tackles when they're tired, like tackles when they get tired, obviously the first thing that's going to go is their technique, right? They're going to start to get a little bit sloppy with their feet. They're going to be a little bit jostled that way. This is a guy that can win against guys as they get tired because he's not wasting speed. He's not trying to win with speed. He's trying to win with technique. Later in games, that's when that's going to break down. I think he could be a weapon in the fourth quarter if our guys are a little bit tired. If you want to give TJ Watt a little bit of a break for that big third down, put him in on first and second down in the fourth quarter. Let him take on some of these tackles as they get tired. Let TJ get fresh, and then on that third down play that you really got to have it, Watt's fresh and that tackle's not. Like that's kind of what I'm hoping his role ends up being. Let TJ, especially because Highsmith is a younger player, still trying to prove himself more so than TJ. TJ can get a break every so often. Like, I mean, like our defense isn't so bad that we can't put Golden out there on a couple snaps every so often just to give him a breather. That's where I think his impact is going to be felt, is giving him a break. So that way in that fourth quarter, again, Watt can hunt the quarterback and end games for us like he has in the past.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's probably going to be his role is something like you just said there. I think he's got a little bit of James Harrison in his game in some ways, and that same type of chip on his shoulder. Whereas even though he was a second round pick still back in 20, I was like, you're a bad athlete, man. Like you
can't do
you're in
it.
a 4'9" at 6'2" with 31-inch arms, and it's like there was a lot of I was one of them. I was one that was kind of counting him out. I'm like, this is maybe too early for this guy because he's a good player in college, but is it going to translate? He was one of the exceptions here where, despite being undersized and a bad athlete testing wise, he really had an excellent NFL career, and it's still going maybe for another year or two. We'll see how long, but he is a guy that, like you said, he wins with his technique and his stoutness and power. And so I think the combination of those things is going to offer some stability with depth at that position. And I think, Shayne, the biggest thing to note here with all of this is we look back to just last season. I mean, you're talking Malik Reed and guys that have no business being on the field. And you go to that, and like in March, like it looked like the Steelers, they had like Quincy Roche and Jameer Jones before he got cut by the team for the allegations. And so that was looking so concerning. And now you fast forward a few months later, you have Markus Golden as your first guy off the bench, and you have Nick Herbig as your fourth edge, and the Steelers always keep four. That looks so much better to me now. So much so, Shayne, that I would argue this is the strongest position from top to bottom, considering you've got a top 5 player at the position. You've got a really good number 2. You've got that solid depth piece now, and you've got the rookie who we don't know exactly what we're getting, but fourth rounder, at least there's some upside there. And we both liked Herbig a lot in college. So how do you feel overall about the position right now?
A lot better, like you said. And I think the nice thing too is Golden is one of the best examples of a player that can help Herbig hopefully become a true edge rusher in the NFL, because similarly to Herbig, he does not have the length, but he did get the technique down. He has the power. If you can teach some of that stuff to Nick and show him, okay, this is how, even against bigger tackles, longer tackles, this is how I've been able to become a double-digit sack guy at times in my career. That type of stuff could elevate him, because Herbig does have the athleticism. And that's the thing that separates the two, is Herbig kind of is the opposite of him, where he doesn't have length either, but he does have the athleticism, maybe not the technique quite yet. If he can kind of combine those two things, you could get a really great long-term edge rusher out of Herbig, because Golden's there to help him as well. So hopefully that is something that he can learn from.
Yeah, and I think in order for Herbig to be that guy, he's really going to have to win with technique a lot, because you're just there's things that you're going to have to be able to overcome. He's never going to be the most powerful. He's never going to be able to long arm tackles, because he just doesn't have those type of traits. But if you can become that technician, there can be a lot of value in that guy still. All right. If you are a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and you would like to support the Steel Curtain podcast, please consider subscribing to the Steel Curtain podcast on YouTube. We appreciate all your support. And if you are joining us live now, go ahead and drop your questions in the chat for us, and Shayne and I will get to those. Shayne, let's talk about some potential breakout players here, maybe the biggest breakout players for the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2023. We threw together our list here, and we chose guys that have been here already just for a little bit. Not any of the newcomers, but we're going to go down through our list, and we're going to say why they could make that jump from last year to this year. We'll start things right off here with Kenny Pickett, and I think that this is one that most fans would agree with. We should be able to see a jump from Pickett from his rookie year until now. We're already seeing some of those transitions in terms of his yards per attempt, his passer rating, his ability to take care of the football was probably the biggest one, even though a lot of those early picks weren't necessarily his fault. Second lowest interception rate in the NFL in the second half of the season. And he led his team to technically, Shayne, a 6-1 record down the stretch. That's if you don't count the one game in which he threw one pass before he got the concussion and left. That was 6-1 record, 7-2 since the bye week, regardless of how you look at it, even with the game that Trubisky had to come in against the Ravens and threw 3 picks and sabotaged the game. So you're talking about a player who has improved at the very least down the stretch. Still a long way to go though, Shayne. And I think the biggest thing for Pickett is he has to bring that yards per attempt number up. That cannot be down anywhere near the 5s. Like that's got to jump up to like the 7-ish range. Because those opportunities are going to be limited with how much the Steelers want to run the ball. They got to make each opportunity count. Listen, a lot of this goes hand in hand with Matt Canada and his offense. Doesn't allow a lot of room for yards after the catch with his receivers. And that is something that irks me to no end, that the Steelers are dead last in that category. So they're not aiding Pickett there. But he's got to be able to find ways to overcome that, be a little bit more consistent, maybe bring that like, what is for you, Shayne? What is like that ideal like baseline? I need to see this yards per attempt number from Pickett in 2023.
So my thought offensively in general, this is across the league. So I don't really care what kind of offense you run. I don't care if you throw it 40 times a game or 25 times a game. I want at least 7.5. Like if you're 7.5, that means you're a good passing offense to me. Like that's
a great threshold. Yeah.
Like schematically speaking, how the receivers are playing, the quarterback's playing. If you're at 7.5, you probably don't have any major questions as far as the way the offense is run, the scheme, how the receivers are playing. That's at least going to get you to the point where you're pretty effective getting first downs, keeping the chains moving, right? I don't know if they're capable because of who the coordinator is of getting to 7.5 this year. I think it's going to really take a lot of heavy lifting by Pickett and the receivers, which is possible, but it's asking a lot, I think, because of the way the offense is probably going to be run. But then there's really 3 things I'm looking at with Kenny this year. It's one, he is going to be starting as a starting quarterback right away in training camp. He's going to have all the reps. He's going to do all the stuff there. He's going to have the best opportunity to kick things off well. That's the number one thing you look at for a breakout. He is a second-year quarterback, which is always when you want these guys to break out. Oftentimes it is when they have their best season. Sometimes they will have a little bit of shakiness after that, but usually this is where things kind of click, and then you just see how much better can they get from there. Varies from guy to guy, but usually you see that second-year leap. And the last thing is the weapons are there. Like, even though we know how Deontay Johnson played last year, it was rough to watch sometimes. But again, a lot of that is offensively. It's just kind of how it was. I'm hoping a little bit more explosiveness from those guys this year. I'm hoping to see a little bit more, just in general. How do I say this? Kenny needs to be able to do some of the stuff on his own. That's just that's what it is with Matt Canada's offense. He can't just sit there and run the offense, unfortunately. If he wants to be successful, he's going to have to make some stuff out of structure happen. And I'm hoping that he has more confidence to do that. And Matt Canada understands, like, yeah, sometimes the play isn't going to be good. And I need to give Kenny confidence to say, hey, if it's not there, it's on you. You figure it out. Because if they give him that confidence, I really think that that's where he can elevate his game the most, making more of those out of structure plays, and also just getting in a rhythm with with his receivers. If him and Pickens can play anything like that, there when he threw the ball to Pickens last year, especially down the field, one of the more effective plays in football. Whether it's because there's pass interference a couple times, it's just really hard to guard that play, right? If he threw it on time and accurately. They got to take advantage of that more as well. If you really need it on 3rd and 8 and nothing's open, like, be willing to let it fly to him, because it oftentimes is going to work statistically. It did last year too. there's so many ways he can break out that it feels like he's going to. It's just how much of a breakout can he have with this offense?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned throwing to Pickens. That needs to be what happens more often this year. Like you need to get that 84 targets up to over the 100 range because quarterbacks, Kenny Pickett and Trubisky combined, had over 109 passer rating when targeting Pickens. Good things happen. And so I agree with you, Shayne. Matt Canada just has to loosen the reins up, up on the guy, let him call the 2-minute offense, let him call some of his own plays, let him work outside of structure, because I think ultimately that's where Pickett's going to be at his best. And one of my comps for Pickett coming out, just in terms of a play style comp, was Tony Romo. And I thought that if Pickett can reach his upside, he can be a player like this. You don't have to have the biggest arm. You don't need to be like an elite runner of the football. But boy, if you can scramble and you've got a good head on your shoulders and you've got the right leadership mentality, you can be a player who can perform similarly to that. And I would love to see that from him. And so I definitely want to see him take that next step forward. And there's not going to be a good stat to measure. I think the best stat is always going to be the game film and the eye test and how is he performing, because stats can be misleading at times. And if he's working against Matt Canada, if he's still not getting any help from receivers after the catch, that's going to affect him. So obviously I hope that the Steelers get a lot better in that department this year. I hope that they're more willing to pass the ball over the middle of the field, because if you're scrapping slants, drags, and post routes from your playbook, that's a terrible idea to try to protect your quarterback. You're actually hindering what they're able to do in their upside. And so you want to see the playbook change. I don't know how much it will and how much we can count on that in Canada's third season. But I do think the signs will be noticeable, Shayne. I do think that we'll be able to see that significant jump in Pickett. And I think that one way we'll be able to tell that is just the Steelers' points per game. Like if we get halfway through the season, the Steelers are still averaging 18, 19 points per game. Something went seriously wrong in Pickett's development, I think, at that point, if you're not overcoming that.
In general, I'd say so. Like if you're looking for a statistical breakout, it's just probably not in the cards for him realistically. Like he'd have to well overplay the offense. Because again, I don't want to harp on Pickett too much because we have other guys to get to, but this offense is quite literally not designed to create chunk plays. It is not designed to create explosives. It is designed to get 11 yards in 3 plays. Like that's what it's designed to do.
Yeah.
And as much as that is ridiculous in the NFL nowadays, let's just be honest about it. That's why if Kenny breaks out, it's going to be noticeable because, one, we're going to get more explosives than we probably should just based on how the offense is constructed. And you should see a little bit more statistical success. Like if he can have, even nowadays, this means nothing, but 4,000 yards, 25-ish touchdowns, and less than like 12 picks, he probably outplayed what the offense was asking him to do. Like that's sad, but it's true. Like that's kind of where we're at. Like if he does that, he probably played better than he had any right to. And that's just kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, Shayne, if his season looked a little bit like kind of what Daniel Jones's season did last year. I know that fans don't want to hear that, but you're talking about a team that wants to run the football 40 times a game. So if the Steelers have their way, I mean, Pickett's going to end up with the 3,300 passing yards and maybe 20 touchdowns, and you're going to play very much game managing football. And that's, again, this is not my philosophy, because when you have to go from the 20-yard line down to score, and you're counting on every single play being a successful play for them when you don't have many plays designed to get big explosive numbers, then you have to bank on your offense not stalling out. And more often than not, it will, and the Steelers will be forced to kick a field goal, be forced to punt. So I don't know if the philosophy is right, but I do think that you can see a kind of like a Daniel Jonesy type season. And obviously we hope we see more traits than that and more playmaking ability overall. But I do think that Pickett is a strong breakout candidate this year. I think that he will have improved numbers across the board in his second season. The question is how much, and I hope it's a significant jump. Let's talk about Jaylen Warren here, our second breakout candidate. Warren was extremely efficient. And if you go back, obviously this time last year, Shayne, nobody knew Jaylen Warren, or at least they didn't know what he was going to be. We had no idea that he was even going to make the roster at this point, but he leapfrogs Benny Snell, leapfrogs Anthony McFarland, 2 former 4th-round picks, not just to make the roster, but to become the primary backup to Najee Harris, and carved out 30% of the offensive snaps last year for the Steelers. Very efficient with his usage. A guy that averaged 4.9 yards a carry and 7.6 yards of reception, and good things happen when he was on the field. And so I'm very excited for his progression, his development. Is a guy that was, I mean, short, compact frame, didn't test particularly well coming out of Oklahoma State, but you just see an explosive player who just wants it on every carry, and a guy that is unwilling to go down on first contact. And so definitely excited about what Jaylen Warren can bring in year 2.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think that for him his breakout is a little different than the other guys on this list because we know that he is going to be the number 2 back and he should be. But
Yeah.
his as a change up back for Najee in this offense, that still might mean over 150 total touches because they want to put the ball on the ground. And I think to a certain degree they should because of how they're built. But even more so, like they have the ability between these two guys to have a really effective rushing offense with an offensive line that gives them space, right? Once Najee's in the open field, good luck with that. Because between being 240 pounds, he can make moves that guys his size just should not be able to physically do in terms of cutting and making guys miss. Warren is just a ball of energy that's really hard to tackle and deal with, and he surprises you and gets past. I think he really breaks away from guys, not just because he's faster than we think, but because they don't think he's as fast as he is until they are up with him, and then he's past them all of a sudden. So for me, I want to see at least 150 total touches, maybe 100-ish carries, 30, 40 balls caught. I want to see the running backs be used in the passing game more and more effectively this year because I think they're both quality receivers. Najee especially, like his tape at Alabama, especially as receiver, was awesome. I want to see them tap into that more. But with Warren, I want to see that efficiency stay there. If he can stay with that efficiency, especially as a runner, close to that 4.5 plus yards per carry that he averaged last year, this running attack will be super effective between the both of them. And you can see this as a mini breakout and kind of confirm him as a long-term, at least like part of a rotation in the backfield.
Yeah. And Shayne, I'm not going to be shocked at all when Jaylen Warren takes a much bigger bite of the apple this year in terms of the Steelers offense, because I just think that he's going to be one of those guys that is going to be hard to keep him off the field, even if Najee takes a step forward as well. And we would expect Najee to with the supposedly improved offensive line, and it should be.
Yeah.
So Najee's efficiency can jump forward as well. But I mean, when we're looking at the traits that Warren has, it's just like he hits the hole hard. He's quick. He's relatively fast. He's not like, he doesn't have that extra gear, like the take it to the house gear, but he hits top speed fast, and he runs hard, and he doesn't lose speed on arm tackles, and just all the things that you look for. And he was efficient as a receiver even. And so I think he's just going to be one of those guys that is just hard to take off the field, is even if Najee takes a step forward as well. And so very interested to see what he brings this year. I mean, he's just a guy that's just going to fight for every yard. And so no chance that he's leapfrogged on the depth chart. I don't think that fans would have to worry about him losing his role or anything that way. I think he's very firmly in there. And if you want to talk about like advanced numbers, you look at like Football Outsiders, his advanced stats were tremendous last year. Now, he didn't qualify for rankings on a lot of them because he didn't have enough usage. But in terms of his per play numbers, they were outstanding. And so it's not hard to see how this guy could take that next step forward and maybe carve out a true rotation. I threw this out here, Shayne, to my father-in-law, actually, and this is way too high of praise for the players that they are at this point in time, but I can see very similar play styles. It reminds me of a lot of Jacksonville when they had Fred Taylor and Jones Drew. Like those, that feels like the dynamic, kind of the difference 1-2 punch
in skill set.
Like
too,
neither of them like the burner type, but they both still complemented each other very well.
Yeah, like this backfield has really high potential. It really does, because the blocking, again, we hope, and there's no reason to think otherwise, that regardless of what happens to tackle, who starts and who doesn't, the interior should be incredibly strong with all the guys they have there. The tackles, especially more if he does play for a while, or whether it ends up being Jones, that should be very good, especially in run blocking if Jones starts. Like that's something I'm confident he can do right away. Bring Washington in to help. Everything is on the table for them, and I think if these two can play up to their potential, we're going to probably be a top 5 rushing team in the NFL this year. Like that's I think that's what the expectation is internally too, is we want to be one of the 5 best rushing teams in the NFL, and they could do it.
Yeah, and based on, the trajectory of the second half of the season, it's not that hard to believe, especially considering, you reshaped your entire left side of your offensive line and you added Darnell Washington. And so definitely, I don't think that that's out of the question at all. Let's talk about George Pickens, our third breakout player here. a lot of people will say maybe you can't call George Pickens a breakout player because he already had such a great rookie season. And the guy had over 800 yards on just 84 targets, which is phenomenal. I think he was 13th in the NFL among all players in yards per target. And that's considering not always getting the highest quality targets from both Pickett and Trubisky. And so what he was able to do was phenomenal as a rookie. Now, obviously, still has some major holes in his game. Like if you look at advanced stats on Pro Football Focus, 0 percentile in terms of his separation, but 100th percentile coming out of college, at least in terms of his catching traffic stuff. And that's what we saw again as a rookie. And so a guy right now that just doesn't run the most crisp routes and doesn't create a lot of space, but he's a guy that I genuinely feel like he doesn't think that he needs to, because he thinks if the ball is coming his way, he's going to soar over somebody and catch it anyway. So, but we would like to see the before the catch stuff and the after the catch stuff both get a little bit better in terms of route running and run after the catch.
So yeah, his breakouts, it's interesting. So for him to break out, he's basically going to have to either have like a big time touchdown season on top of improving his receiving numbers, or he's going to have to catch, closer to 80, 90 balls and be more of an effective route runner. And I think that he has the physical ability to become a better separator. I don't think unlike some other guys like Kenny Golladay, for example, he's a guy that people kind of I've seen compared to. First of all, Golladay, as good as he was at times with the Lions, he was never the type of aerial athlete that Pickens is. Like, he didn't win those contested catches in the way that George does, right? He's uniquely talented in the fact that, like you said, he does feel, and so far no one's been able to tell him otherwise or prove to him otherwise, that if the ball's in the air, it's his and no one else's. And that's pretty much been the case his entire life, probably, right? Now, do I want to see him add extra elements to a game? Absolutely, because that's how you go from being a number 2 player that has a unique skill set to becoming a guy who could be a number 1 receiver who can get 50 targets, right? That's what I want to see, is can he add some of that to his game? Because again, the physical ability is there. The speed is there. The lateral agility, I think, is there to do it. It's just, can you convince him, like, hey, I know you're great at what you do. Do you want to be one of the best in the NFL? Because if you combine even solid route running ability with his unique skill set, that's what he could possibly be. I really believe that. So it's up to him to get there. And I think that this team can teach him how to do. We've seen how this team develops wide receivers. But it's just, is it going to happen this year, or are we just going to see maybe an expanded role of the same type of stuff that he was successful at last year? So,
yeah, I agree. I think that's the difference, Shayne, is you can be the Alshon Jeffrey type, but do you want to be the DeAndre Hopkins type? Do you want to be a guy that you can just pepper with targets because you are a good route runner on top of being a guy that's going to catch everything contested? So, and the contested catch stuff does not worry me. I don't worry about him regressing there and all of a sudden being a player who suddenly doesn't catch the ball well in traffic. It's what he's done from high school till now. And he's just such a natural football player. If he can hone in on the rest of his craft, I think you can get a special player, especially when you factor in value of draft position. I think the Steelers took him 52nd. I had him 38th on my board, and I think that's too low, Shayne. And so I think that he's going to be a guy that grossly outplays his draft status if he continues to progress this quickly. And so we obviously hope to see more of those types of things from him. If I had to ask you right now, Shayne, like, what would be your ceiling? Let's call it ceiling of Pickens's numbers. Did you think that he'll produce in his second season, like receptions, yards, and touchdowns?
I think the ceiling is about 80 catches, around 1,200 yards, and like maybe even double-digit touchdowns. It just, with this offense, it's hard to kind of predict anybody to have double-digit touchdowns, other than maybe like Najee, just because of the running game. But I would say somewhere between 7 to 10 touchdowns is the ceiling for that. So again, 80, 1,200, 7 to 10, and that's again if he not only does everything he already does well and just does it more, but also gets a little bit more of those plays where he's separating from guys and has a couple big plays that way. So,
yeah, I would certainly take that. Sign me up for that.
Yeah, I'll take that this offense.
I know it's all going to come down to volume, Shayne, because like I said, I think that how can you not get the guy the ball more? When you have 800 yards on 84 targets, how can you not get the ball more than what you did? And I think part of the problem is they rely on a lot of YOLO balls down the sideline.
Yeah, which you don't want to rely on. So it's like,
no, you don't. And you have to get him in situations where he can win more consistently he wins at the catch point, but like the target quality is not always going to be there. It could be well defended. And so get the guy across the middle of the field, get him in space, get him running more than just like goes and comebacks. And I'd like to see that part of his game improve, and maybe they'll kind of loosen up the reins on him a little bit and not just use him as that down the sideline receiver this year. Let's talk about Pat Freiermuth, our fourth of 5 names here. Again, another player, Shayne, he's been in the league 2 years already. Some might say that he's already broken out, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. It's just what I'm put him on this list for, Shayne, is I want to see, can he take the jump from you are that definitely at least a fringe top 10 tight end to, can you jump up to the next tier? Okay, is it possible for you to ever be in the Mark Andrews tier of tight end or the Dallas Goedert tier? We're not going to go crazy here. I'm not going to say George Kittle, Travis Kelce. Those are 2 monsters of their own. Yeah. And so I don't think that's as reasonable, but can he be like that next name, like right below those 2 guys up there, somewhere in that range?
I think that for him, there's really 2 things that has to happen. He has to stay healthy, keep that noggin feeling all right, because he's gotten knocked around a little bit too much for my liking. That's something you worry about. But that's the main thing, right? He's got to play enough to get there. But the other thing, and this is the biggest thing for me, is he has to be put in a position where he can run after the catch. Because even though if you look at his numbers run after the catch, it doesn't jump out at you at all. But the highlights of him after the catch are funny to watch. Defenders just don't tackle him well. When he gets going in a straight line, guys bounce off of him. He can make people miss. He is a great athlete in space for a tight end. He really is. So it's really up to the offense and Kenny to work with him, because if you can get him into open space occasionally, even up the seam, whatever it is, and let him just rumble, he's going to get a lot more yards per yards per attempt thrown to him. He's going to have a lot more yards per catch. Like, his potential to be that Mark Andrews level of tight end is there, because I think that's actually a pretty good comparison for him as a receiver overall. People have tried to call him, like, I think Baby Kelce, stuff like that before. They win in similar-ish ways, but Kelce's so unique in the way that he's never wrong as a route runner. He's pretty much always right, no matter what. That's something you just can't really project to a player, but he has similar ways of winning. Like, he's capable of winning in similar ways. Let me put it that way. So it's really just about what kind of volume does he get? Because I think he should be realistically the number 2 target on this team most of the time. I love Pickens, and as much as I think Deontay can be a good player still, he's a guy that has to move up in the pecking order a little bit. He just is more talented and just plays better when he's given that opportunity. I want to see 1,000 yards from this guy. I do. I don't know if it's going to happen this year. I think it's asking a lot, but I want to see it because I think he is a 1,000-yard type of tight end. Like, I really think he can be that.
Yeah, I cut up a number in a tweet earlier in the season, Shayne, and at one point he was on the pace, I believe it was not for 923 yards.
Yeah.
Then he had the concussions, and look, give this guy the dorkiest helmet
I don't care what it looks like. I don't care if it's 8 foot tall and it doesn't make sense. Like, just
it can be made of memory foam mattress. I don't care. If
it
keeps him on the field and it keeps him it prevents him from getting another concussion, give it to him.
Give him
because
one
he's
too.
Get it. Yeah. Buy him in bulk.
Yeah. Seriously.
Go down to the Sam's Club there.
Right. Yeah.
They need him on the field, and he's really good. I mean, as a receiver, he's really good.
Yeah.
Up till week 18, Shayne, Freiermuth was the 2nd highest graded tight end in the NFL, behind only Travis Kelce.
Yeah.
And that he dropped to 6th. I believe he's 6th or 7th, 6th in the NFL at the end of the season. Just in that last game, he played sparingly, got the knee injury, which scared all of us half to death, because we're like, is this going to linger on to next year?
Yeah.
Ended up just being a sprain, fortunately. But the guy he needs to be peppered with targets because he's just good. And you talk about his run after the catch ability. This is something that doesn't necessarily show up in the stat sheet, because not everything is equal. And what I mean by that is, if you put him in Kyle Shanahan's offense where you're doing a stretch play action rollout and you get guys streaming at 3 different levels across the middle of the field, you're going to have a lot more room to run after the catch. And when Freiermuth is on a hitch, has to make the first guy miss and then break another tackle after that, it's a lot harder to get yards after the catch. It's worth mentioning, though, that he by far led the Steelers in that department last year. And that's over their wide receivers. Yeah. So get the guy the ball, get him the ball in space, allow him to break tackles after the catch, because he's very physical and he's got a little bit of wiggle to his game for being a 6'5", 258-pound player. So I'm excited for Freiermuth. Again, the biggest thing both you and I said, got to stay healthy, got to be able to avoid those concussions, stay out on the field, avoid the nicks and bruises that can sometimes hamper him a little bit. But when he's healthy, he's good. And so he needs to be a guy that I think Shayne should get the ball 8 to 11 times a game, that many looks. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
Yep. So we can definitely see a breakout season from him in year 3. One more name on the list, Shayne, and we'll wrap up today's show. This one I feel the least confident of the group about a true breakout season, but I threw DeMarvin Leal on here. And the reason why is because we did see some of those pass rush flashes before he had the knee injury and went on IR, and then he played a little bit sparingly after he came back. And I think part of that was just trying to reserve his health a little bit. But this was a guy, and again, you go back to his college tape, which was the biggest sample. At one point, he was viewed as like a top 5 pick in the draft. And this is before he tested at the combine. This was before he kind of had a so-so junior season. But the guy was really productive in the SEC. He's incredibly bendy for being an interior pass rusher at this point. So I'm excited to see what it brings to the table. Like, it wouldn't shock me that even if he's a guy coming off the bench, if he pitched in like 6 or 7 sacks for the Steelers and 8 tackles for a loss, he's just a guy that can get after the quarterback and he can clean up a lot. So what would be like the standard of a breakout age for Leal? Like, what would that have to look like for you for him to break out?
I think because of the fact that his role is kind of unknown is what hurts him the most. Is like, we really don't know how to project what he's going to do because we don't know. And I don't think the Steelers really know either yet what his role is going to be, because if you slot him in as essentially a backup edge, right? Because of how much they like to play these guys, and they just signed Markus Golden. If his primary position is edge, he's probably not going to play a ton, right? He just probably isn't. If he's going to play inside, there's still more depth there now. With they obviously drafted Keanu Benton. They brought Ogunjobi back. I think if Ogunjobi didn't come back, his role would be even more defined. But again, I still think that they want to have a rotation in there. They don't want to wear those guys out, especially more so than the edge rushers. So it just comes down to his role. Like, if he plays 30-40% of the snaps in some way, shape, or form, I do think he could get 5, 6, 7 sacks, just because I think everyone else around him will give him the opportunity to get those one-on-ones, whether it's inside or outside. And when you give a guy that has been like this and has the production in the SEC, he's probably going to win a lot of those one-on-ones, whether it's on the edge or not. So I hope that he plays more, and I hope he plays more of a defined role, even if that role is a hybrid one, as long as it's defined and they know, okay, in this situation, he's an inside player. In this situation, he's an outside player. Like, as long as that's defined for him and he knows what he's expected to do, I do think that he's a talented player that can get some production this year.
Yeah, and the role is obviously very important to his career trajectory as well, Shayne.
Yes.
If I had it my way, I would only play him on the edge in true rundown situations, like goal line. If you want to throw him out there on 1st and 10, whatever, every once in a while, that's fine with me. But I'm not going to say, are you an edge? Or are you an interior guy? I think he needs to be an interior guy. Like, ideally, that's where I would. And so if I had my way, it would be 80% interior, 20% on the edge at the most. And I think Shayne, just based on his skill set and how he wins with quickness and bend and pass rush moves, I think that playing him at the 3-tech spot is going to be his best role in the NFL. Yeah. And I want to see him there often. And so in a perfect situation, let's see, you got the other guys, you've got a pretty deep group at this point with Benton there and Ogunjobi coming back healthy. And you would like to be able to see him as that situational rusher almost from the interior that you can say, come in here on 3rd and long and tee off on the quarterback, go and get pressure there, clean up the sack, allow somebody else to clean up whatever it is. But I think ultimately, if he works out, that's going to be his best role as the interior pass rusher type. And I think that's something similar to that stat line, the 5-6 sack range is reasonable. Even taking that jump after being injured last year to that, I don't think it's out of the question. It is going to come down to a matter of rotation and usage. Like, how are the Steelers going to use these guys? Like, obviously we know that Hayward is the top dog there. He's going to be the guy that gets the most snaps. And then Ogunjobi will probably follow after that because he's making $9.5 million a year. Between Keanu Benton, who might play a little bit of a different role, and DeMarvin Leal, like, I'm interested to see how the rest of the depth shakes out after that point and how many snaps these other players are getting. Like Braden Fiocco, like, is he gonna come in just play nose a few snaps a game? I have no idea, but there's a lot of turnover here, Shayne. You're talking no Chris Wormley unless the Steelers decide to bring him back healthy some point this summer. He's not under contract anymore, so no Wormley, no Tyson Alulu. Montravius Adams could be gone. He's probably the odd man out at this point. So there's a lot of different faces on the defensive line at this point, and I'm interested to see how it shakes out. Like Isaiah Loudermilk, does he stick around on the roster? In what kind of role is he gonna be that 5-tech player? And so guys that wear different hats, I would say. And I think that if you're looking for guys with niches, like his niche is going to be rushing the passer.
Yeah, from regardless of where he's playing, it's definitely rushing the passer right now. And I think really, like you said, what does the depth chart actually look like, right? Because you know who your starters are in terms of the 2 interior defensive linemen. If there's 2 on the field, it's going to be Hayward and it's going to be Ogunjobi. We kind of know that.
Yeah.
Then it comes down to, is Benton the primary nose tackle at this point? Like, does he win that job? Even though, again, I don't think that's necessarily his best role. Does he play that this year a lot of the time? And then kind of switch between 1 and 3. Does Leal switch between 3 and 5? Because if you kind of have him as the primary 3 and 5 backup, then like he could play a significant amount of snaps. It's really just kind of hard to know right now until things shake out. I'm curious to see in the preseason, especially, and also during training camp, which definitely hoping to be there this year a couple times. Where does he line up really? Like, that's just kind of like what kind of role does he have in camp practices, and then in preseason, do we see him play mostly on the edge? Do we see him play mostly inside? I'd like to see kind of close to what you said, like an 80-20 split inside out, especially if the outside reps are very specific, but it's really hard to tell with him right now. It's really kind of hard to see what they want to do with him.
Yeah, it is. Training camp's definitely going to give us a clearer picture of a lot of these questions that we have and we proposed here today. So, and that's one guy that I'm looking at in particular because he was a guy. I mean, you look at the value the Steelers got him compared to the consensus board. Like they got him way above value when they took him in the 3rd round in last year's draft. And so obviously its rookie season was kind of derailed, but I'm interested to see what he brings to the table because I think there is some moldable talent to work with there. Just going to come down to what position do the Steelers view him at? That's ultimately what's going to matter. So we'll know a lot more of that stuff here in the near future. All right. By next week at this time, Shayne, we're going to be looking at 3rd wave of Steelers OTAs, and then we're going to get on from that. We're going to have a little bit of a dry stretch, and then it's training camp after that. So things will move around pretty quickly here. The summer goes by fast. So thank you all for joining us today on the show. You can follow Shayne on Twitter at Shayne Kubas. You can follow me on Twitter at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Steel Curtain podcast wherever you get your podcast. Also, check us out on YouTube or ask Alexa to play the Steel Curtain podcast. Thanks for listening to the Steel Curtain podcast.